In today's Farm Report, the West Coast shipping dispute was ended earlier this year, but the impact of the slowdown is still being felt, as Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse reports.
The West Coast shipping dispute may be resolved, but its impacts are still being felt. U.S. Meat Export Federation President and CEO Phil Tseng says shipments of beef, pork, and lamb from this country were up in February compared to January, but were lower than a year earlier.
We're still down double digits, both from the pork and the beef complex, 10, 11% respectively. But when we take a look at where we were in January, there is a slight uptick. And I think the biggest thing is the psychological boost that's come from this. I was in Asia just a few weeks ago, and not knowing when the dispute was going to be over with, people were not interested in really talking or pursuing orders. And now with the dispute more or less behind us, what we're starting to see is a lot of that interest rekindled.
Tseng says high-value chilled exports were hit especially hard by the West Coast shipping backlog.
For example, in Japan, they would say we have roughly a 45-day shelf life on chilled pork and basically about a 60-day shelf life on beef. And so anything that would delay the shipment of these items puts it in jeopardy. And so I think pork was probably impacted more than beef, but both sectors suffered as a result of this. So having some normalcy return, and of course we saw the chill orders come back quickest, this is what is really encouraging. For us, that's one of our key leverage points in the international markets is selling the chilled product, because that advantages vis-a-vis the Europeans who cannot supply chilled because of the distances. The Europeans, especially in the pork arena, they've been very, very active in Asia, not only since this labor dispute, but since our onset of PEDV. They've been really trying to ensconce themselves in these markets, and so there's going to be a lot of work done in order for us to regain our market share both in the beef and the pork complex.
Export Federation Senior Vice President for the Asia Pacific, Joel Haggard, says moving forward this year, U.S. pork will continue to face challenges such as a strong U.S. dollar and large supplies from key competitors.
If there's anything in our favor, it's the fact that domestic pork prices in Japan and Korea, two of our major importing destinations, are up 15 to 20%. We hope this will translate into overall increased imports, but we'll likely be fighting it out with the Europeans this year for some of the commodity frozen pork business that moves based on prices.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
The United States of Trade? Very good, according to U.S. Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker.
Exports have played a critical role in growing our economy. More than 304,000 U.S. companies are exporters, and that nearly 98% of those are small or medium-sized businesses with fewer than 500 employees.
The Commerce Secretary was joined by U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman, talking with reporters about the U.S. of Trade report earlier in the week. As for ag trade, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack notes its role.
The report indicates that the United States Department of Agriculture was very busy last year in breaking down and removing over 120 trade barriers, impacting $6.4 billion worth of trade potential. That's one of the reasons why we continue to see strong agricultural exports throughout the last several years and reaching record levels the last several years.
The most recent example of USDA's efforts, Friday's announcement that U.S. beef trade had resumed with Mexico and that U.S. pork exports will be expanded into Peru. I'm Ron Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Trade Promotion Authority for the President has been something the Obama administration has been pushing Congress to pass so that the administration can get the Trans-Pacific Partnership passed, an economic partnership with 12 other Pacific Rim nations. The USDA recently has been doing the same, talking to agricultural stakeholders. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse has more.
USDA officials have been on the road around the country meeting with agricultural stakeholders this year to talk about the importance of Trade Promotion Authority for the President in expanding international markets for U.S. products. USDA Deputy Undersecretary for Farm and Foreign Agricultural Services, Alexis Taylor, was in California a few weeks ago and this week in Florida. She's also visited with producers in Oregon, Washington, and Pennsylvania.
I think I do see a geographical difference on the issues that they're facing in various markets, whether it be tariff issues or sanitary issues and phytosanitary issues or non-trade barriers, depending on the products that they're growing. But I think consistently I'm hearing very strong support for the president to get Trade Promotion Authority, and then in a little bit longer term, really passage of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. trade agreement, which is with 11 other countries, predominantly in the Southeast Asian region.
Taylor says while producers are supportive of TPP in particular, they do have some concerns.
One of the concerns that I hear is just to ensure that it's a truly comprehensive trade agreement. There's a concern that agriculture may be left behind. But one of our priorities is that this is a comprehensive agreement. It doesn't just cover a section of agriculture. It'll cover all of agriculture. There's some huge potential here in this region, I think, for our producers in Florida and the rest of the country. When you look at the growing middle class in Asia specifically, by 2030, 66% of the world's middle-class population will be there. And what are some of the first things that they want to do when people start making more money? They want to buy better food. And that's specifically meat products, dairy products, and fruit and vegetables.
There is a sense of urgency to get Congress to approve TPA so the TPP can be concluded by the end of this year, since next year is a presidential election year. So Taylor encourages farmers who support it to tell their story.
You know, agriculture has a great story to tell when it comes to exports. Last year, we exported $150 billion worth of agricultural products. 4.4 billion of that came from Florida. We have a surplus in agricultural trade, which is one of the few industries that we do. And so tell that story. Make sure people know how much agricultural exports are benefiting you directly and in turn those rural communities.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
A big day for U.S. meat exports Friday, with this announcement from Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack.
We are excited about the opportunity to reintroduce beef into the Mexican market. We're also excited about the agreement that was reached with Peru, which is a companion agreement to one that we reached earlier with Chile on fresh and chilled pork.
And the added exports to these two nations are expected to add millions of dollars to an already strong overall U.S. ag export value total. USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service worked with counterparts in Mexico and Peru to lift barriers in place. In the case of Mexico, due to BSE concerns for U.S. beef, barriers in place for over a decade. This is Undersecretary Ed Avalos.
The work that APHIS does is so important to our success in obtaining agricultural exports. We live today in a world of free trade agreements. We live today in a world of negotiations of other kinds, but so often countries will use a phytosanitary measure to restrict trade. And APHIS is instrumental in resolving those issues.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.